A little bit of background on myself. I was at VMware for a really long time, so if some of you are familiar with vCloud Director and wondering what the hell OVDC is and PVDC is, well, I'm partly to blame for that. So joining me today, we have Jeremy Brooks. He heads our, well, I should correct myself, Captain Jeremy Brooks. He heads our customer success team, and he will be talking to us about what Platform9 is doing in the hybrid cloud space. We also have Pawan. He heads our Kubernetes team, and he will be talking about container and Kubernetes orchestration. And finally, I will talk about Fission, which is our contribution to the serverless world. So let's get started. But before that, I would like to talk to you about Platform9. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Platform9. But if you do, please interrupt me to ask questions on what our strategy is and what our long-term vision is. So we were founded in 2013, all ex-VMware engineers. We are a Series C funded company at this point of time, with Menlo Ventures, Redpoint, Canvas, and HPE funding us as of today. We're 50+ employees based in Sunnyvale, California, not far from here. And we are growing 4 times year over year. We also received many awards, most notably last year, Gartner 2016 Cool Vendor Award. Very proud of that. But what gets me going every day is the number of customers. We have 60+ enterprise customers to date. We are serving them day in, day out. We are managing them. We are not just shipping product. We are managing them on day 1, day 2, day N, upgrade, support requests, the whole thing. We have 300+ regions worldwide that we manage today. Just imagine, AWS is about 12, 13. We have 300+ regions that we manage for our customers across their data centers, Linux, KVM, AWS, and other public clouds. What are we trying to do? So this is what we see the customer's journey when we talk to our customers. Everyone started with physical. Thanks to VMware, virtualization was there. It made it easy for you to deploy and develop your code. But then AWS, private cloud, OpenStack, CloudStack, all of that happened, and it changed it. DevOps was born. You can run infrastructure as a code, so we adopted that. Then we had containers, microservices. Everyone wants to be like Google or Facebook, perhaps at a smaller scale, but they still want microservices. Containers paved the way. People are adopting it. That's what we're trying to do. Then we have serverless or function as a service. We'll touch base on all of them. But before that, we would like to talk about hybrid clouds and what we are doing. Before I hand it off to Jeremy, any questions so far on Platform9? Okay. Go ahead, please.
The recent funding round at $22 million?
Yes.
What are the ideas that money is going to go towards, other than just carrying on what you're doing? Anything specific?
So we are going to scale. I think this is our time to scale. We have built the basic products. Now we need to enhance them and obviously scale as a company.
Is that scale on sales and marketing or on the engineering side?
On all 3 fronts. And you will see that I spoke about this journey. Each individual piece is a large portion. We have done some. There's a lot more to be done. And you will see that throughout this presentation where we are and what we need to do next. Jeremy, over to you.
All right. Thank you, Roopak. As Roopak mentioned, my name is Jeremy Brooks. I manage our customer success organization at Platform9. Roopak talked about those 60+ enterprise customers we have. Myself and my team live their life day in and day out, from day 1 onboarding all the way through to day N upgrades, day N break fix. That's kind of where I come in. Before I came to Platform9, I spent 8 years at GE, kind of jumping around from security, application, cloud security into our internal private cloud, where we got to use vCloud Director, and kind of how we got to know the VMware guys. And then ultimately came out here to Platform9. But I'm here to talk today about hybrid cloud. Everybody's heard the word. Everybody here is familiar with clouds. Everybody knows that managing and running a cloud is difficult. So when we start to throw the word hybrid in there, how does that change things and what do we do about that? So just a show of hands quick, how many of you guys use a number of public/private clouds, AWS, GCP, Azure, OpenStack, a mix of them, right? And is anybody in just one of those clouds? Nobody. Everybody's shaking their head, right? Today, in the world we live in today, nobody is in just one location or one cloud. And now we want to start talking about how do we facilitate that management? How do we tie everything together across all of those? So, like we said, hybrid cloud is the new norm. But what is hybrid, right? So to kind of kick things off and level set, our definition of hybrid is any combination of resources from multiple cloud endpoints. And this can be any combination of multiple public clouds, multiple private clouds, a mix and match of private and public clouds, or realistically, a mix and match of workload encapsulation. So now we're not just talking about infrastructure as a service. We're starting to move up to that next level where we're discussing containerization and microservices. And then as Roopak is going to show later today, the next level up that ladder as well, which is serverless. So how do we tie all of those together in terms of what our customers and what ourselves, internal customers, are asking for and manage them uniquely? And so that's something that Platform9 has been working on, and our journey is continuing to evolve to this day. So when we dive into this, why do we feel hybrid matters? There are a couple reasons, a couple big advantages we get from hybrid cloud. The first and foremost is this on-demand scalability. I no longer have to wait if I'm running my own private infrastructure to scale out to handle more and more workloads. I have the concept of burstability and elasticity into public clouds, or even starting at a baseline in a public cloud for somewhere where I need 99.7, 99.9 uptime for my public services, and then scaling them internally to handle data processing and things like that. And really what that's going to help us do is help us with cost management and overhead. I can now essentially put the concept of cloud arbitrage to use. If I can tie all of my public and private clouds together, I can start weighing them against each other based on the cost that they're offering me at any point in time, leveraging concepts like spot instances with AWS and similar concepts across other clouds to really get the value that I need to drive my costs down and provide my availability. And that all sounds great, right? If I told anyone in here today that we could do that hands down, everybody would jump and say, yeah, where do I sign up, right? But there are problems with that too, and it's difficult to get our heads wrapped around. But connectivity, how do we tie all of those clouds together so that app that's living everywhere can talk to each other? How do I handle data gravity, and where's my central data repository for all of those endpoints? Does my data just follow it around? And last but not least, visibility into all of those clouds. If I have AWS, I have GCP, I have OpenStack, how do I see all of my workloads that are running out there today? There are concepts out there, and we're going to talk about those coming up. But how do I tie that all together in a single pane of glass, give me some sort of governance across them, some sort of cost governance as well? And they're difficult things to wrap our heads around, but that's what Platform9 is here to kind of help with and talk about as we go forward. So we talk about how our hybrid clouds are difficult to manage. What do we as a company think you should do to manage those hybrid clouds? Everybody's seen Salesforce and their famous no software button logo. What we have, or what we're stating is, why go with a CMP? We're recommending an open orchestration framework rather than that CMP. What it's going to give you is that single pane of glass, that unfettered open access to all of those clouds and no vendor lock-in. An open source API endpoint that handles that translation across any cloud that you're looking to provide to. Now, a lot of you may have watched our videos from previous Tech Field Day events. In fact, in February in Austin, our sales engineer lead was here to talk about OpenStack Omni, and we're going to dive into that and how that's going to help with this. But if everybody closes their eyes for a minute and just imagines this truly open cloud experience and how powerful it would be. Open APIs to avoid that vendor lock-in. We can run on anywhere, any infrastructure, and we're open to all applications and services. I have a tier for every type of application. I can support the legacy pet type of applications. I can build new microservices and new serverless technologies. How are we going to do that? And that's where we really start talking about that mix of clouds and mix of virtualization frameworks. So Platform9 does that today with managed Kubernetes, managed OpenStack, and as Roopak's going to talk about, what's starting to come out are Vision service, which is that next generation of serverless. So before I dive into this, are there any questions on any of that?
I wouldn't mind just asking, people often go to clouds deliberately because they want to use cloud-specific technologies. So it sounds great to have arbitrage across clouds. So you have a lowest common denominator that you can do, well, on public clouds would be the Kubernetes offering. But what do you say when customers come and say to you, but I don't want to actually have the same thing across every different cloud because I'm using DynamoDB or CosmoDB or some particular features native features from public clouds?
Exactly, and there are those use cases where you're going to fit and piecemeal together those features from public clouds that may not map and mirror across everything. But if you think about the DevOps mindset, it's building that 75 to 90% of infrastructure in code and having a reliable, repeatable way to deploy that. And if we can do that for that large chunk of your services, we're taking overhead off your hands. Your DevOps teams no longer have to go out and write development work to AWS, to GCP, to OpenStack, and redo that work. They have one single source to actually call and take care of that low-hanging fruit. And then you can still manage those extra services within each cloud.
That low-hanging fruit is also a current state. And I know, let's move the serverless to the side, because that's obviously the future where you're going to. But the low-hanging fruit of managing EC2 instances, managing containers, I would think ultimately would move away as customers start to use more and more native cloud services, because yes, we don't want to be managing individual VMs, even via OpenStack or even individual containers via Kubernetes. Does that mean then what you're offering other than the serverless, becomes a shrinking market over time?
It is and it isn't, right? So if we look at as we step up that scale, Kubernetes at its inception has always kind of had this foundational concept of it works well on top of an IaaS layer. IaaS isn't going to entirely go away even though we're talking microservices. So you still have an operational concept there. And as we'll talk more about our serverless offering, we're actually building serverless on top of Kubernetes as well. So at some point, even as you have cloud concepts, somebody has to control the underlying infrastructure. But more and more as you go to the public clouds, you'll have some of those freedom of movement features as well.
You're saying it doesn't matter how far up the stack you're going, you're still going to need infrastructure underneath, maybe containers, maybe some IaaS at a VM level, and we may as well use Platform9 to manage it.
Exactly.
In addition to that, I actually don't really agree with the fact that you will be using DynamoDB. I'll give you just one example or a couple of examples. A lot of the traditional applications are using RabbitMQ. They're not using SQS service from AWS. How do you run it today? It's very difficult. You want to run Rabbit, but you don't have it as a managed service. But if you use a common infrastructure, you would be able to deploy and manage it across any infrastructure. Same thing with, let's say, Mongo database. AWS does not provide Mongo database as a service. You want it, but there is no way to do it in AWS. So restricting developers to the choice, yes, you cannot do. But if you look at the number of services provided by individual cloud provider, they're not going to be enough for any developers to program. And they won't be able to keep up with the community as a whole on all the new technologies that will come up. And that's where I think the public cloud and even the infrastructure is good at providing infrastructure, but at a layer above, you will have application developers dictating how they manage the services. And I think that's where having a common infrastructure would help. And that's where or as a whole, open source comes in to help. So it's not just Platform9, but as Jeremy pointed out, and I think he's going to talk about it, I will let you go ahead.
Yeah, the true open source community. And what you bring up is actually something our customers struggle with every day. Yes, we want to get out of the infrastructure game. Yes, we want to take advantage of clouds. But at the same time, I have an ERP system, or I have a back-end payroll system, or I just have a back-end data processing system that I can't re-architect because it's too cost inefficient for me to do so today. And it may happen over time, we'll get there, but I still need a way to support that in the new world as well. So you still kind of have those steps or tiers as you move up that, call it a ladder of cloud enlightenment. And having something that can support each one of those tiers is almost necessary in today's enterprise world.
So is that also then a play into one of the DevOps mindset is use the best tool for the job, which in reality means you've got 100 different tools doing the same job in an enterprise, but those need to be managed because you're not necessarily going to refactor your code. And I noticed also some of your recent messaging is open source as a service. So we're talking OpenStack, Kubernetes, and then obviously Fission. But I can see potentially the vision getting bigger. You mentioned RabbitMQ. You know, there are many open source projects that enterprises love to use, but they've got this concern about manageability and supportability. And as the developers are using all their crazy multitude of tools, you're getting more and more open source tools. It's more and more difficult to manage. So is that also an adjacency that you guys are going to move into, is taking on more of the open source tools, not just at an IaaS provisioning layer, but something like RabbitMQ as a guess?
Not 100% sure about that yet, but yes, we have been moving into the infrastructure space, and I think we have enough for us to be playing in that field. Perhaps partners and others would help us in doing that.
Okay.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, and as Roopak brought up, a lot of this is actually being driven at the developer level. And Pavan's going to talk even more about this as we get into our Kubernetes specific conversations as well. We can control what we offer as an IT department, but that doesn't stop a developer from going out and slapping down a credit card for a managed Mongo service that exists out there in a third party today, or just bringing in any sort of open source tool that they know and work with because they use it in their private lives as well.